In this video, I'm going to talk a bit about the DOTween demo, the DT adapter, which is something that you use with DOTween and tiles, and how the sample tile in the DOTween demo does some simple customizations of the user interface as seen in the painter. So let's take a look at this scene. I've already loaded the DOTween demo. It's pretty simple. There's a camera, a tile map, and a canvas, which just shows these legends is all. There's no controller. The tiles are completely autonomous in that respect. So, tile map, tile. When you look at the DT demo tile, you'll see a number of drop downs. These will change as you pick one operation or the other. For example, see scale. Scale just shows us start size, the end size, how long it takes. You can have this mode is either tween or a sequence, and ease type, which doesn't really affect anything about the demo. If you look at position, things change. Rotation changes again. If you look at color, it changes again. So I'm going to show how to do that. These are real simple things to do. In a nutshell, the attributes used for fields and so on have the capability of using a property to determine whether they're active or not. And that's exactly how this is done. So let's take a look at the code for a minute. If we switch back to our project, scripts, the only script in this is the DT demo tile itself. So if you start scrolling down through the code, you'll see there's an enum for the mode, whether or not each of these operations, colors, scale, and so on, uses a tween or a sequence. You can have 4 different types of operations: scale, position, rotation, or color. These properties are used as parameters in some of the attributes below. Operation is scaling, position is color, is rotation, is so on. These are the various fields. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, if operation show the field, if operation is scaling. In other words, if the operation you picked through that very top drop down is scaling. And so you can look at these yourselves, but really each of these uses a property to determine whether or not they're visible. Show mode, property, and the name of the property in quotes. So another important thing here is a declaration of something called a DOTween adapter. This is really all you have to do. When we start, we use TileUtil to set the transforms to absolutely neutral. In other words, no scaling, rotation, and so on. Prior to that, we set the tile flags just to be sure, to make sure there's no tile flags so the transform and color can be changed. Then there's a delayed callback. Delayed callback is a function in tplib. Delayed callback means after 10 milliseconds, start effect will run. Basically, it takes the operation for a tile. Each tile only does one of these things at all. It'll either do scaling tween, scaling sequence, color sequence, position sequence, rotation sequence, and so on. Some of these only do sequences. Since this is really just an illustration, I didn't do every option for every type of tween. The other important thing is you have to have an on-disable handler. DT adapter on-disable handler clears everything out and shuts off all tweens that are running. That can't happen automatically in DOTween for a number of reasons, mostly because DOTween is made to work with game objects and not tiles. So let's take a look at a sequence, for example. Rotation sequence. You declare a sequence. We have to use DOTween.2 because there's no built-in functions for dealing with tile transforms. DOTween.2 to the rotation property. This is a getter and a setter, as they're called in DOTween parlance. And if you look at rotation property, it just uses TileUtil get transform rotation, at this grid position to get the rotation, or TileUtil set transform with current values and whatever is changed, which is value here. In other words, the input to the property. And the other one's position sequence, has a position property, color sequence, there's a color property. With tweens, this particular thing, scaling, is done with either tweens or sequences, but they really all work the same. You create a sequence, you add it to DT adapter. You have a tween like this, DT adapter. Now let's take a look at DOTween adapter. So we have lists of tweeners used by this tile or sequences used by this tile. And there's a list of augmented callbacks. So let's take a look briefly at what happens when you add a tween. Add tween takes a tweener and will automatically play unless you set this to false. Should be noted that add sequence does not have autoplay. So if the tweeners list here, this private field, is null, a new one will be allocated from DOTween pools, which is a static class for pools just for DOTween. So you add the tweener to the list. If there's already an autocomplete, you get a new callback from the pool and basically sort of hijack the pool. You can examine how this works yourself. It's not that complicated. Otherwise, just add an onComplete to this custom delete tween. And delete tween on autocomplete will remove the tweener from the internal list. And sequences work similarly. What happens is on disable is, if you recall, in the DT demo tile, we have our on disable calls on disable handler. On disable handler calls kill all, which you can read this for yourself, but really it just kills any running sequences and tweens, which is similar to what DOTween does, except DOTween doesn't know how to deal with tiles being deleted. So kill all and return the sequence or tweener list to the pool. So this is really all DOTween adapter does. It keeps track of your sequences and tweeners for you, and when on disable comes, if it does, it cleans things up for you. So let's run this just to show that it works. You can see scale, position, color, rotation. In TilePlus Painter, you can see scale changing, the position changing, the color changing, and the rotation changing.